My name is Boyd Sleator. I'm the chairperson of Atheist NI.
My name is Jane Donnelly from Atheist Ireland.
My name's TJ Clare and you're listening to Freethought Friday.
And you're listening to Freethought Friday.
And you're listening to Freethought Friday.
When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out.
Science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs.
In all of science, we're looking for a balance between data and theory. You don't have to delude yourself with Iron Age fairy tales.
The same spiritual fulfillment that people find in religion can be found in science by coming to know, if you will, the mind of God.
The real world, as it actually is not evil. It's remarkable. And the way to understand the physical world is to use science.
There is a new wave of reason sweeping across America, Britain, Europe, Australia, South America, the Middle East and Africa. There is a new wave of reason where superstition had a firm hold.
Teach a man to reason and think for a lifetime. Think for a lifetime.
Hey there, Internet, and welcome to episode 208 of Freethought Friday, with your usual host, Ciarán O'Flynn. Unfortunately, again, poor Rob couldn't be with us today, but we do have another fantastic guest who's from Northern Ireland, and that is Boyd Sleator from Atheist NI. Welcome,
great.
Boyd.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for coming down. I've unofficially titled this podcast Catholic Atheist or Protestant Atheist, being godless in Northern Ireland. And I suppose that comes from, I would say, my own cultural limitation, that I assumed that people from Northern Ireland could only be Catholic or Protestant, never mind atheist or anything else.
Yeah.
And of course that's no doubt as a result of the narrative that I would have experienced as a child growing up in the 80s, watching various different news reports from UTV and whatever else. Can you maybe give us, I don't know if you want to give us a little bit of background to yourself first, and then maybe what it was like not being...
Yeah, well, I mean, people give themselves labels. So, yes, you do have that whole idea that people are either Catholic or Protestant, but whether half of them even follow any sort of religious belief is another thing. It's better sort of probably to define people in Northern Ireland as unionist or nationalist, simply because it's really more so a territorial thing rather than a religious thing, although the religion then is incumbent, brought into it. But from a personal point of view, I didn't really come from a Protestant background, although my parents would have been Protestants. They grew up in Protestant areas. As I was sort of saying to you earlier, my mother would have from a very young age been an atheist. She wouldn't have believed in God. She probably wouldn't have used that label. She would just have said, I don't believe in God. And my father would have been a part-time Protestant.
Part-time Protestant.
Yeah, and now I would guess, I would say that he's agnostic. But yeah, personally for me it was, I noticed sort of bigotry and sort of sectarianism, and straight away sort of thought that this is silly, that because everybody is the same, people are the same, and for them to sort of define each other by what their religion is and then build bigotry into that, it just seemed completely silly to me from the offset.
And so were you sent then to, or I know we're going to talk about religion or education in Northern Ireland maybe a little bit later on. Were you sent then to a particular religious oriented school or ethos school, or is that the way it works?
No, in actual fact, well, the initial primary school, I went to 2 primary schools and then went to 2 secondary schools, and the first primary school that I went to was a state school, and in Northern Ireland you tend to find that more Protestants would go to a state school, and the Catholics would go to a Catholic school. Right. So, but the first primary school I went to, it wasn't as if it was all Protestants there. The second primary school that I went to, I actually looked at the stats quite recently about, you know, what the denominations were. Sorry, I can only speak at the minute. And it's pretty much 50-50. But it still would have been seen as a Protestant school. And right next door you had a Christian Brothers school, you know, so that would have been the Catholic school, this would have been the Protestant school. And when I went into secondary school, I went to an integrated college. I went to Hazelwood Integrated. And I mean, yes, it was an integrated college. I think the issue for it at that time was that it was in a flashpoint area. You know, you still had bigotry, you still had sectarianism in the school. It wasn't handled very well at times. Right.
Can you just explain to me, I don't know if anyone else in our audience might understand an integrated college. Can you?
Yeah. So rather than it being seen as a Catholic school or as a Protestant school, it was an integrated college where Catholics and Protestants could come together, and it was sort of advertised or promoted as that, you know, as an inclusive place.
Place. So that's interesting. So so the state school you went to officially was everybody, and certainly had elements of both the predominant communities that were in Northern Ireland, but generally it was Protestant. And do you mind maybe talking about your parents or your family life? Was that particularly sectarian or not sectarian, or
not at all? I mean, when I was very young, we travelled a bit. You know, my dad worked overseas, so for 3 years of my life I lived in Malaysia. You know, which is you know, so you know, at that stage, I think. In coming back to Belfast to start primary school, I had already been influenced by other cultures and realised that, you know,
other cultures
yes, they existed, and that there was no difference. You know, we had friends of the family who were Muslims or Jews or Christians, and of all sort of different races. You know, so it wasn't. It was very strange to find this sort of segregation in Northern Ireland when I came back to it, and you know, when I first sort of ran into it, it was a bit like, what is this? Why does this exist in the way that it does? But no, my family were not. They would have never pushed any sort of one sort of value, like a Protestant value or a Catholic value, and they would probably be more so. Well, my dad would probably be more so unionist. You know, he would want to be still part of Britain, and my mother would probably take the same viewpoint, but only as an economical standpoint, as I probably would as well. You know, I would probably think
from a completely pragmatic point of view.
Yes, exactly. But no, there was never any push from my family in that respect. But I did, you know, it was very evident that it existed outside of that. Yeah.
So actually, there's an interesting question. So you had a very well, perhaps an atypical beginning, given that you, as you said, you were in Malaysia, I think it was initially. So would you have had other friends who might have been similar in your thinking, in that this whole transubstantiation, consubstantiation conflab is a little bit weird, or actually were most of them kind of down the line one or the other, and then you were perhaps the odd one out?
I'd say I was probably the odd one out, because I would always question it. Right. You know, I would always question the ideas. For example, two of my best friends, they would have had to have gone to mass, you know, every Sunday, but they didn't want to go in. But it was still sort of built into them that existed, you know, even though they didn't want to go and attend mass because they found it boring. And a lot of the people that I grew up with, still to date, would consider themselves not religious, but they would consider themselves either Catholic or Protestant.
They'd use the label.
Yes, they would. And some of them are, you know, religious and practicing, and you know, that's their choice, that's their decision to make. But they would question me on my thoughts. Right. You know, they would be more. I mean, because I tend to not try and bring up atheism. I wouldn't bring it up, but the conversation always seems to come in, and that's when I have to step in and go, no, that's not right. You know,
it's absolute nonsense. It's obviously the flying spaghetti monster.
Yep.
He touched you with his noodly appendage. I like to throw in an FSM quote every episode.
Yeah.
I know there's a little biographical, but you had said to me earlier on that you had actually then you were living outside of Northern Ireland, outside of Belfast for a while. So when you came back, did you notice then any kind of sea change in Northern Ireland? I mean, obviously there has been changes that we've all seen. But perhaps from the point of view as an atheist who was an atheist for early on, have you noticed any kind of change in people's reaction to you being an atheist or atheism in general?
Yes and no. I mean, what I found was, I mean, I left Northern Ireland to go to Manchester because of the music scene. You know, it was very in Belfast. It was like it was non-existent to a certain extent, or at least it wasn't well supported. So I left to go to Manchester to be involved in that, and in coming back, the music scene is much better, and people are more open to ideas, certainly. So people wouldn't have criticised me any more or less. But what I did find is when I came back and we sort of decided that we were going to set up Atheist NI, there were a lot of people who came out of the woodwork to go, yes, we're into this, which I would have suspected that earlier on, before I left to go to Manchester, would have been very different. And that there might be two reasons for that. One is that maybe they didn't want to come out, to use a better word. The other one might be that I wouldn't have been able to construct something correct for it. You know, my ideas might have not been as well developed. You know, I might have went down the route 10, 15 years ago of just slating religion, whereas now I have a better understanding of what religion is and how to sort of make things a bit more inclusive, to draw people in. And
no doubt a more constructive organisation now exists, where perhaps it might have been deconstructing previously, as you said. I know from talking to a lot of people who go through an atheist phase, perhaps at a much younger age than certainly I would have, they say people tend to go through this, or young atheists, be they young or old in actual age, tend to go through a kind of firebrand militant period where they are just slating and attacking and looking for targets, and they deal with them head on. So I definitely think organisations like Atheist NI, which I know you're going to talk to us a little bit about in a few minutes, and Atheist Ireland seem to be the more mature, constructive kind of groups that are trying to tackle particular issues rather than tackling the religious, which I think most of us know, because most of us of course have religious friends, are just people, more often than not very nice, well-meaning people, and perhaps with just not particularly well thought out ideas. And so that's interesting. Then when you went back, as you said, maybe not a huge amount of a sea change, but at least when you started. So actually, do you want to tell us how old is Atheist NI and how maybe that came about to?
Atheist NI would be probably coming up to about a year from when we sort of when the people got together and said we wanted to do something else. So it sort of started off by when I came back to Belfast, I had an idea to screen the Unbelievers film with Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss. I got in touch with Lawrence and he said he'd love to come over to do a Q&A. Sent an email off into the ether asking Richard Dawkins to come over, and he replied and said he was up for it, and that just brought people out of the woodwork. I think Colin Morrison, who does our social media stuff, he had said that that would have been the biggest gathering of atheists in Northern Ireland ever for that first event. And in doing that, as soon as I sort of said, well, put up some advertising for it, certain people contacted me and went, I want to take it for this now, you know, and those people became the sort of core group of Atheist NI. You know, we started meeting up and we decided to have some secular brunches, and this was before we'd even named it Atheist NI. And after a while, maybe after a couple of months, we had said, okay, so what do we want to do? Do we want to name ourselves? What's that name going to be? We need to put a constitution in place, you know, and all those different bits and pieces, as well as what we're going to make what we're going to target as in things that we think need to be changed in Northern Ireland. So
excellent. And so the Unbelievers, was that screening about 2 years ago?
No, it was in September of 2014. Yeah.
So as you said, about a year ago.
Yeah,
excellent.
exactly.
Right. And how many people did you say were at that gathering, or at the screening? At
the entire screening, I think it was 420. So there were two screens. I think one which holds 270, the other one which holds 160, something like that. And they when we put the tickets on sale for the first event, they went on sale with only advertising on Facebook, and they sold out in something like 11 minutes. And then the second set sold out in 7 minutes. You know, we organised another screening that day to go into the other cinema, and then brought Richard and Lawrence from one screen to the other. But yeah, in total they sold out in sort of 15 minutes, I think, which was excellent. Yeah, that's
fantastic, and definitely would indicate that there is an interest in Northern Ireland, certainly for both these two protagonists, no doubt.
Yeah, and
then obviously for the organisation. So what then have you guys done since forming? What I mean, I'm aware of that you're doing regular brunches.
Yeah.
As Atheist Ireland now has been doing quite successfully for a while. So is that the main kind of activity that you guys do, or that's just the most regular one you do?
I would guess our main activity up to date has been the sort of social media side of it. You know, putting articles out, you know, commenting on news, that's relevant to Atheist NI or relevant to atheism and humanism and secularism, and we have certain goals that we would like to achieve, but that has been the main focus. But the brunches have been very good. They've been very well attended. You know, maybe between 25 and 35 people at each of them. You know, which was surprising for us. You know, we sort of thought it was going to be maybe 10 or 15 people, you know, turning up, which is great. And they're just a social event. They're a very relaxed social event. But we supported Gay Pride in Belfast, and we did an event for that, and we had Gita Sangal over for that, who is the chair for the Centre for Secular Space. So she did a little bit of a talk for us, which is very good. At the last brunch, now usually the brunches are just social meets, but the last one we had a speaker from Coleraine University, a guy called John Ward. He was talking about Jonathan Swift and his writing, and we at that event, actually another friend of mine, Tamina Kazi, she came over to that event, although she wasn't speaking on it, but she's just written one of our first blogs, our guest blogs even, and she's from British Muslims for Secular Democracy. And yeah, things are starting to progress more and more, and we just had a meeting there on last Sunday, with the exec team to discuss, you know, what are we going to move on. There were a number of different ideas at the start, but the main one that we're going to look at is the religious education in the schooling system, and how that needs to be changed, and what needs to be done about it. There are a number of issues with it, from the syllabus itself being set out by the four main established churches in Northern Ireland, which are all Christian. There's another issue, which is there is an opt-out clause in Northern Ireland, so you can opt your children out, but there doesn't seem to be any provisions for them to do anything when they opt out. And
we're having that exists. That problem seems to be here too as well. But anyway, sorry,
So that would be something that we would like to focus on. And there's another issue within the Catholic schools, that the teachers in Catholic schools have to have a certificate in religious education no matter what they're teaching. You know, and so there's certainly a bit about employment equality with regards to that. There's also a human rights issue with regards to the way it's being taught. So these are things that we have decided, okay, this is our main focus, and this is what we're going to work on. So at the minute, it's a lot of sort of data collecting and looking at what changes we can make. So
excellent. I'm going to come back to the education thing, and I just have one other question to ask in relation to Atheist NI's existence, young existence at the moment. Have you guys had any kind of contact with the political establishment from the point? Well, given that, of course, in particular from politics stroke religion stroke sectarianism is obviously a very, very big part of Northern Ireland politics. But I would imagine that the most vocal opponents to a group like Atheist NI probably would come from the DUP end of things. Or am I being very unfair there to the DUP?
You're not being unfair, no. There hasn't been that much of an outlash against us, or a backlash against us. Sorry, it would be the Free Presbyterian Church that would probably have the biggest issue with us, if they were vocal about it in that way. But with regards to politics in Northern Ireland, there was a guy called Andy West did a news segment for, I believe it was for Newsnight, and he had asked Northern Ireland MLAs if they were religious or not, and 7 of them said that they were non-religious, and he asked them to go on TV, to do an interview. Only one of them would actually go on the TV to do that interview, and that one, after doing her interview, Andy West had to spend about 3 or 4 weeks convincing her party, the Alliance Party, to let that interview be aired. So it's still a very, very touchy subject for people in Northern Ireland. And yes, we need, from Atheist NI's point of view, we need to bring that up and show people that atheism or not believing in God is not a bad thing.
It's not a problem.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
So that's an interesting thing. Do you know, from the statistics point of view, how many people would either declare themselves as either non-religious or atheist or humanist in Northern Ireland?
I think it's about 10%.
About 10%, right. So, I mean, which is not too dissimilar to most countries, at least declared figures. So, I know from listening to a number of US podcasts, one of the things that they are constantly bringing up is that in their Congress, which has over, I'm going to get this number wrong now, I think over 500 people, that there doesn't seem to be, I think at the moment, a single officially declared atheist.
I think there's one.
Oh, there is one.
I think there might be one. As far as I'm aware, I believe that things
I know
I've
there
read
was
on
one
it,
before Barney Frank was one who was publicly open, and then he had retired, I think, at the last election, whatever.
Maybe that is it.
Right, but no, there may be one now or whatever. But I know it's a point that is it David Silverman from American Atheists is always bringing up, that especially in a population as big as America,
statistically, there has to be.
Yeah, there has to be.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Dáil, I know there's at least one. I think there's more than that. I think possibly like with the Northern Ireland Assembly, there's at least 7 or 10. Or I'm sure somebody's going to correct me on that. I must try and get the stats. But it's. I don't know how much of a problem it would have been maybe in the 90s, but it's certainly not a problem now for politicians. It seems to be a very clear look. It's just not part of Irish of politics in the Republic.
Yeah, I mean, and that's great, and I would say that it's probably very, very similar in England, Scotland, and Wales. But Northern Ireland is very like the American Bible Belt. It's very like that. People are worried about saying no. I don't believe in any sort of supernatural deity. They're
worried about the ostracization or the or shunning effect or whatever.
They're worried about that, possibly worried about how that comes across their families. With regards to the politics, it's about voters, and that's their worry. Are people going to vote for me now that I'm an immoral atheist?
So I mean, I think definitely, and I would agree with Richard Dawkins' view on this and many others, that having come out of the homosexuality closet as I did, and had seen that the LGBT community do that worldwide and how that has positively affected those causes, I completely agree with Richard Dawkins' reasoning that the more and more atheists and secularists or humanists who come out of that closet, the quicker we'll get to a point where, as you said, it's not totally seen as an issue, and then perhaps even better, where those statistics will start going up and eventually become a majority statistic. So so that I suppose I was wondering whether or not politicians in Northern Ireland might have, or like even on an individual political level, start perhaps trying to backlash against your organisation. Does your organisation maybe take up very specific political issues with individuals or parties?
Excuse me. It will be something that we will look into more. At the minute, I'm just trying to organise actually a meeting with one of the MLAs, hopefully on Friday, to discuss certain things with her, regarding Atheist NI and what we want to achieve.
Okay.
I would say that there's probably, once we start to push on this a bit more, there will be a bit of a backlash from it, but that's not a worry for us. That's understandable. What we do need to sort of put across is that although we're called Atheist NI, we're very sort of open. We're secular. We've had Muslims and Christians attend our brunch, and it's about opening up that dialogue. In actual fact, I spoke 2 weeks ago on a BBC Radio Ulster show, and it was around about it was talking about being able to opt out of religious education in Northern Ireland, or at least prayer in assembly. And the guy that was on sort of taking the opposite point of view to myself, he was like, the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland still want religious education or Christian education. Now, this wasn't by any means a proper survey, but by looking at the comments that were put up, not on our page, but on the interviewer's page, it seemed that the vast majority of people, do want secular education. Even Christians commented on it, said, you came across very well, and I'm a Christian, and I think it should be a secular education as well. I think the vast majority of people, and again, I'm sort of doing the same thing that he is, but the vast majority of people don't want this sort of religious bigotry anymore, and I think they realise, even if they're Catholics, Protestants, atheists, Muslims, Jews, whatever, that the only way for us to be able to integrate with each other is to understand each other better. And that's another thing, atheists are very commonly pointed out as, you're an angry atheist, you hate God and stuff like this. It's not a case of that. It really isn't a case of that. Yes, sure, there's going to be angry people in every group.
In
every group, but we want.
There seem to be a lot of angry people in Free Presbyterianism, though.
Yes, there really
maybe
does.
I'm calling that unfairly, but
I don't think you are. I don't think you are at all.
They seem to be quite angry.
Well, I don't think it's just that they're. Okay, I could say something really wrong there. I don't think it's just that they're angry. I think it's that they hold on to the belief that they have, and the Free Presbyterian Church tends to be built up of people that sort of believe the earth 6,000 years old. Really, really silly ideas which do not have any sort of relevance in science today, and they hold on to those beliefs so sincerely and devotedly that it's very, very difficult for them to even have a discussion on the matter, because they won't, as you were saying, they won't sort of face the evidence and base their opinions on evidence. They base it on faith, and that's...
And of course, it's not a faith that's shared. In fact, it's something that I quite often have brought up with other people who will argue from a very passionate faith-based position. Just to remind them that the vast, vast, vast majority of people on this entire planet do not believe what they believe. And I'm not even, they may be a Catholic or they may be whatever, but even if they were Catholic, it is highly unlikely that the vast majority of Catholics, let alone anyone else, believes precisely what they believe in the way that they do. And when I brought that up with people, they do kind of step back a bit. They're kind of going, oh yeah, because they themselves know that there are plenty of Catholics who don't agree with maybe a particular interpretation of whatever it is. So it's difficult to break down or to have a meaningful discussion.
It's extremely difficult to break it down with somebody who has, who holds beliefs that are totally irrational. I mean, I have to say, I have to come from a standpoint that the honest answer is to how the universe and everything got here is, I don't know. And that's the honest answer.
The most scientifically valid statements you can make.
Yeah, but based on the evidence that's available, I have to say that it's not God-based or supernaturally based, but I still don't know. But when you're arguing with somebody who believes that it's God and that's all there is to it, and it was 6,000 years ago and Adam and Eve were here and Noah built an ark, you're really... I don't like to say this, but you're arguing with stupidity, you know, and
not necessarily a stupid person,
exactly,
but stupidity is a mindset.
Yes, exactly, and but when you're discussing with other Christians, other people who, you know, take Christianity seriously or Islam seriously, who are open to those ideas, or, you know, realize that, you know, it's not a literal sort of word of God. Then you can have a dialogue, and you can have a conversation which is productive, and that's really what you want. You want to have that productive sort of conversation. I think at the minute there's a little bit of an issue as atheism is seen as a dirty word, which it needs to be changed by more people sort of saying, well, yeah, I'm an atheist, or at least I'm nearly an atheist. I'm very convinced agnostic. And the other thing is that there's other things wrapped around that, like with Atheist NI. It's about secularism. It's about, you know, protecting minorities and everybody having a voice in that. But secularism is a dirty word as well. You know, there are people in Northern Ireland and England who, when I mention secularism to them, they're like, no, that's just trying to get, you know, that's trying to hurt my,
through the back door.
Yeah, exactly. That's trying to hurt my, you know, Christian belief or Islamic belief or whatever. And I will ask them, well, what is it you want? What do you think would be a good system? And then they define secularism. You know, it's like, just use the word secularism. Yeah, exactly.
My dictionary definition.
So it's, you know, and that's very difficult, because when they define it and you say that's pretty much the definition of secularism, like, no, it's not. It's like, but it is. You know, and what are you meant to do? I mean, I think I said to somebody quite recently, I was like, okay, make up a new word for it then. You know, just make up a new word for it and I'll use it. It's still secularism, but, you know.
Exactly. In fact, that's interesting. I know you and I were chatting about, I was chatting about mathematics and making you listen to me about it. But one of the things I do like, and I have mentioned it, I think, a few times, is at the beginning of every topic in mathematics, the first thing that we would do is we would write down words that we're going to use: group, field, ring, whatever. And then we define them.
Yeah.
And there were many reasons why we had to do this, but because one of the reasons is actually that mathematicians love reusing the same word again and again and again, but the definition would be slightly different depending on which context you were in. Yeah. So it became a necessity that you had to clearly define what you were talking about at the beginning of every conversation about mathematics, and then once you did that, then everyone was able to progress the whole experiment. I love this approach because, and unfortunately, we have to. I would argue, while it's essential to do that in mathematics and indeed in science, I think we actually, I would almost argue, it's even more essential to do it in day-to-day conversations if we're going to have a discussion with people, because quite often I find the problem is there is a misunderstanding of the term. So, like your discussion with the particular person you were talking about secularism. They understood what you understood to be the definition of secularism. So, and as you said correctly, again, as a mathematician or a programmer, I have no problem calling it secularism or junkie face or whatever. It doesn't matter. The word is just a label. Once we agree that if using this label we mean this, then you can progress the conversation. So, I'm trying to be a little bit more mathematical now with discussions with people, and if they ask something, I just go, hang on, let's talk about this word first. Figure out the words and see if we're talking about the same thing. And usually I find we don't get past that. So.
Well, yeah, I mean that still happens. I mean, that still happens with the definition of scientific theory. You know, and it's happened so much. It happened to me only a couple of, I think it was maybe last night. It was somebody that said, well, it's pretty much a fact. It's because it's a scientific theory, you know, but there's enough evidence to back up. And the person's like, you've just contradicted yourself. And I was like, no, you
misunderstand the word theory.
Do you know what pains me more is I've probably had that conversation 1,000 times. You know, it's like, I'm getting bored now. You know, I don't know what to do, and I try to word it if I'm typing it out or if I'm discussing it online or something. I try to word it as rather than wording it as it's a theory to it's a scientific theory. So I put in the word there so as people can go, okay, maybe
is that something different?
Yes, exactly. But they don't. And people read selectively. You know, they totally read selectively, and it's like, just take the time to read it go and research it a bit, and then come back to me, because that's what I would do.
And that's interesting, because I've done the same thing recently myself. I've swapped the word theory for scientific theory. I think Richard Dawkins mentions and I'm trying to remember which book it is now, he swaps the word theory for theorem. Theorem being a word that's used in mathematics. I think he spelled it slightly differently. I cannot recall now which one of his books it was, but I thought it was an interesting idea. It's the same approach that I think both you and I were taking. At least the hope was, if the term or group term is changed ever so slightly, that maybe they'll just stop and think, maybe this isn't what I think it is. But I agree with you. I think people do read selectively, and actually it's not even that the definition is the problem, it's the whole thought process that one would actually stop and think that maybe this is different, and maybe I should go and look it up. That whole inability to Google,
exactly,
Tim mentions, is that's
I mean,
the
Google is there. Like, it's, I mean, usually when you're talking about these things online, it's in your top right hand corner. It takes you 2 seconds. You know,
type away.
And it's, the other thing is, you know, which is very important, is to try and not confirm your own biases. And we all do that. We all do it, but you have to try and work the way out of that. You know, if you have this preconception of what something is, don't try and confirm it. You know, go and try and look at it from an open point of view. Look at different studies. Try to also, you know, look at who is giving you the information and where the research is coming from. So you could Google it and you could find the first article, and Google is a top article, and you look at it and you think, oh, that's right, that's what I was thinking, and then you find out that it was written by the Christian Scientific Organization. It's like, okay, maybe I need to go and look at it, so some more information. So taking the time to look at those things, and even from an atheist point of view, you know, atheists tend to have this preconception of what Islam is and what's written in the Quran, and, you know, what Muslims think, especially in Northern Ireland, where it's multicultural-ish. You know, but we're just not there yet. You know, so people are still a bit like, oh, Muslims, we're going to be frightened of them as well as Catholics, or as well as Protestants. So, you know, taking the time to actually understand what their book is about, you know, what they believe with regards to that, you know, and what different sorts of ideas come from different Muslim communities or different Muslim sects, I guess, or cults. You know, it is another thing that we have to do as sort of rational thinking atheists, if we want to say that. I mean, because it's all about being sort of rational with your point.
Absolutely. I think it's good. I mean, one of the positive aspects, I think, of being a free thinker, and valuing, as I was talking to you earlier about the value set of science, is a willingness to be criticised by your peers when you bring up a point, and to open yourself to at least the possibility that maybe their point is valid and that your interpretation is incorrect or is not complete. So
criticism's great. You know, it encourages debate. You know, and that's really good. It encourages you to actually go and think. Now, no, fairness, you know, I'm never wrong, but, you know, no, but it does. It encourages you to go out and actually think about what's being said to you, and it's a really positive thing, you know, and that's what we want. I mean, it's another thing with regards to the education. We should teach our kids how to think, not what to think, you know, and really, you know, expand on that idea. You know,
I think it appears anyway to me, perhaps in my kind of bubble verse of atheism, but it does appear that idea is really beginning to hold traction or gain traction within the atheist community, of course, which is great, and then hopefully we'll be able to spread out. So actually, that's a nice segue. Then maybe we should have a chat about education. Can you maybe just and again, because the education system in the Republic of Ireland will be slightly different, and for those of us who are not particularly aware of maybe the overall system that also exists in the UK, can you maybe just give us a little primer on how education and maybe religion is done in Northern Ireland? Yeah,
so in the United Kingdom, you have collective acts of worship, which would be in your schools, and they're compulsory collective acts of worship. In the United Kingdom, if you're under the age of 16, you have to have your parents opt you out of that. Once you're over the age of 16, you can opt out yourself. You can also opt out of religious education in exactly the same way. But there tends to not be any provisions for what people want to do in that. One of the other things I've come across is that very few. In actual fact, I've looked at about 50 different schools, and of those 50, there's only one of them that I have so far seen a opt-out clause, you know, so they don't advertise it, or it doesn't seem like they tell parents about it. We have been contacted by a few parents who have been told that they couldn't opt their kids out of it, you know, and I don't know whether that's because they've been lied to, or whether the teachers of the school aren't actually aware of it. And then there's religious education syllabus in Northern Ireland is dictated not just by CEA, I think it is, but also by the four main religious establishments, which are all Christian churches. And the syllabus is, it's kind of funny, you know, it's all Bible based in the first 3 sort of semesters of it, and the last one it's like, oh, there's other gods, there's other things, and it's, when you read it, it's like, oh, we're going to read about a certain story in the Bible, and then they talk about morality straight after it. So immediately people are tagging morality to this belief in Christianity, which is really wrong, you know. So there's possibly a human rights side of it, you know, that, you know, it's against human rights. And
can I ask, because as I have been educated myself on this particular topic, in our primary system anyway, in the primary school system, there doesn't appear to be a specific religion only course. That is, well, I think they're developing one. But religion is integrated throughout the curriculum, which is part of the problem that we have here. Yeah. So technically, it's possible for a teacher to be doing mathematics and saying, well, God invented those numbers, and then to do science and say, well, God invented the earth, and so on.
I think,
does that exist in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I think it does in some schools.
Right.
So it would be case by case.
Right.
You know, you wouldn't find it in all schools. I can't remember in my primary school being like that, but I have heard that it is like that in some schools, which is a serious issue,
because
it's a very big issue.
Because while one could see, I mean, it's possible to opt children out of a particular course. I mean, obviously within secondary school, where things are more modular anyway, it might be slightly easier. But as the point has been made quite a lot by Atheist Ireland, it's impossible to opt your child out of something that's completely integrated into the daily experience.
But if you were able to change the curriculum in order for it to be more about all religions and non-religions, and actually question them and discussing them, you know, in a more rational way, those students should be able to leave that class and walk into another class and question the you know, what a teacher might be putting across, which is to do with Christianity or whatever religion they're into. We discussed this last Sunday with the exec team with regards to the syllabus in primary schools. I think we all came to the agreement that we shouldn't be teaching kids religious education up until maybe the age of sort of 9 or 10. We shouldn't be teaching kids about the Bible before they can even read. You know, it's something that needs to change in a way. Kids should just be able to be children and to play and to experience lots of different things, but not fundamental religion, you know, or religion as a whole. They're too young to understand it. They're too young to understand what the concept is, and that is an issue. You know, it's like, you know, get their brains when they're soft and squashy and fill it full of stuff like.
Well, I mean, this is again, it's something that I try to take to heart, and I don't want this to turn into the I Love Richard Dawkins show. But Richard Dawkins talks about that there aren't Catholic children or Muslim children. There are children of Catholic parents or children of Muslim parents, and it's something actually I do try to practice on myself on a daily basis. I try to challenge even parents themselves when you know, when they're talking about their children being Catholic or whatever, and actually no, they're not.
Just children.
Because I know that these parents themselves don't even understand some of the finer points of Catholicism that I might, because I've had to look it up. So I would just go, no, actually, not until they're 16, 17, 18, when they can start reasoning. Can they really say that they are, they aren't? But
it depends how articulate they are, and how I would guess a kid who's 11 or 12 would be able to make that decision as long as they have an understanding of it. But children are children. They're not Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, Jews. They're just children, you know, and you have to let them be children, you know.
One of the great difficulties that we also have here, I mean, like, so there's a curriculum issue that both exists in Northern Ireland and indeed there are curriculum issues that exist here. But even if we got our curriculum issue sorted out, we have other issues. The biggest one would seem to be patronage. So in our system, almost essentially every school is a private school but publicly funded. Yeah. And as a result of that, the schools themselves have a right to implement their ethos. Yeah. And is that similar in Northern Ireland, or
not exactly?
No.
Within the state schools, and I'm not talking about Catholic schools because Catholic schools are also state schools, but we'll just leave them to one side for a second. But within the state schools, they have to stick to the curriculum.
Right.
So individual teachers might do something untoward and start trying to promote their own idea of what their religion is, but as a whole they have to stick to the curriculum. But the curriculum is not good, is not correct, is not the way that we would see it to be a good way for it to be taught.
But if you correct the curriculum then in Northern Ireland, then at least you've got now the state schools following perhaps a better curriculum.
And the Catholic schools also have to follow the same curriculum. The difference would be in Catholic schools is that they would have mass. You go to a morning mass, or you go to something like that, and a lot of the teachers, well, not a lot of the teachers, but it used to be a lot of the teachers would have been priests or nuns or something, you know, along those lines. So yes, it probably would have come, you know, it would have been a lot more prominent in classes other than sort of your religious education class. The issue I have with Catholic schools is that they are state funded. You know, we shouldn't have state funded religion. And that's why we need to have a secular Northern Ireland and a secular schooling system and an integrated schooling system. You know, and it's difficult because there are some things that we know factually. For instance, Catholics grammar schools in Northern Ireland do better than the vast majority of other schools. You know, I think in the league tables there, at least the first couple of schools are Catholic grammars, and that's a great thing. You know, for all intents and purposes, I would like to send my children to a Catholic grammar if that's where they're going to get a good education. But I would have to opt them out of religious education as it stands right now, you know. And what are the reasons for them having such good grades? I don't know. You know, I don't know. Is it really, really good teachers? Is it Catholicism? Yeah. I doubt it, but it might be.
Smaller class sizes. Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be interesting to look at. I think there is a similar, or at least anecdotally, a similar idea in relation to Catholic schools in the US, where it seems that, I don't know, they had less discipline problems or whatever else.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Maybe it's a discipline. You know, if you're told every day that you're going to go to hell unless you do, you might go, oh, right, okay, I better do this.
Shuts the kids up, So, as someone who's gotten into education quite a bit now, myself in particular, in my last in this last academic year, in my own studies, I've become more and more convinced that the whole system, anyway, whether the religion is involved or not, is actually a pretty awful system. And there are new ideas that are coming up, so they may eclipse any kind of changes that you and or I would like to see. But so we have state-funded Catholic. It's interesting. Why are there state-funded Catholic schools and not necessarily state-funded Protestant schools? Or is it just that state schools are generally seen as likely to be mostly Protestant?
Yes, that's exactly it. The answer to why there are state-funded Catholic schools, I actually couldn't answer that.
Right.
I would need to look into that a bit more. I wouldn't want to give you an answer that was wrong. But yes, you know, there are Catholic schools which are state-funded. So,
all right, and so Atheist NI is right now pushing for a change in the curriculum, or at least that's what you would like to focus on. Is maybe
well, that's what we want to focus on. That is what we're going to focus on. We are doing quite a bit of research at the minute. That's, you know, we haven't publicly put anything out to say this is exactly what we're going to tackle. We're just looking at all the information at the minute and getting ourselves together to be able to do something with it.
Excellent. I wouldn't. Is this mostly primary system, or is it the primary and secondary?
I think the way we have to address it is the curriculum. I think that's going to be our main
the
sort
curriculum
of thing.
applies both to primary and to secondary schools.
Exactly.
Excellent. And so if that's going to be your main focus, are you going to be dealing with anything else then in, say, the coming year or coming 2 years, or is that going to be mostly?
Oh no, there are other things that we want to address. At the minute, I mean, Atheist NI is a non-profit organisation, so part of the other thing I'm going to be looking at is, can we get some funding? Can we get some grants? Because it's there's a lot of work involved in doing that with regards to the curriculum. But yes, there are other things. I mean, for instance, down in the south now you have equal marriage. We still don't have that in the north, and that needs to be addressed. So that might be something else we'll do. There's also the sort of freedom of choice for abortion as well, and that would be something else we would want to address. There's also issues within our government. We had a health minister who turned around and said, something along the lines of, I have to base my opinions on my biblical belief, with regards to policies that he's going to make, and it's like, that can't be the case.
Yeah.
You cannot do that, especially when it was from the Free Presbyterians. This is a guy who's a health minister. It's really funny. He's a health minister who doesn't believe in evolution, who thinks the world is 6,000 years old, and he went out and petitioned, or at least was able to get in the vaccine for meningitis B into Northern Ireland. But meningitis B exists because of it. It's an evolution. It's evolved. So he's managed to get it in, which is great. And then, in actual fact, he's not the Northern Ireland Health Minister anymore, but he managed to get it in. Yet he didn't believe in it. It's very like, I just can't get my head around it at times. Like,
compartmentalization.
Exactly. So that's something else that needs dealt with as well. But
there's also that I don't know if it's still an issue, or I remember reading about it. Is that there was a plaque in the New Interpretation Centre at the Giant's Causeway?
Oh, it's been dealt with.
Oh, has it been dealt with?
Well, it's been dealt with. They've now moved that creationist scientific idea, as they said, into myths and legends, I think.
Okay.
So it's not seen as the scientific viewpoint. And what was really, really bad about that was like I think it's called the C-Lab Foundation, which is like a Christian organisation. They were like bigging up the National Trust. Oh look, they've come on board with us, and it was a bit like, no, they didn't really do that. They sort of did it without realising that that's not what they should have done. There's going to be some sort of backlash against it. But no, that was cleared up.
That was corrected. Good.
I believe so. Yeah.
I mean, that to me was the most important thing that needed to be solved in Northern Ireland.
Of course, yeah.
That's fantastic. I actually, I don't know. I don't think there is an official atheist organisation within Britain per se.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually the British Humanist Association does quite a lot of maybe what Atheist Ireland does here, and perhaps what Atheist NI is going to do. So it may be an interesting thing to have these three organisations collectively work together on some projects. I mean, just because we are, I suppose, the English-speaking sphere within Europe, and
no, of course. I mean, it's definitely something that we want to do with like the Secular Society, the Humanist Association in Northern Ireland is called Humani, and some of the people who are involved with Atheist NI have links to that as well. My introduction to bringing sort of Gita over from the Centre for Secular Space and Tamina over from British Muslims for Secular Democracy, those are things that we would like to work. We'd like to work with them as well. So the more people that we have that we can work with who have secular sort of thinking or are going down that mindset, for the better. That's a good thing. Within Northern Ireland, I think, we sort of hope to be at least the voice of reason,
singular voice.
Yeah, and probably maybe not singular, but at least the outspoken voice of reason. There are
angry.
Not
have some competition there.
Have I come across it angry at all? But yeah, I mean, because there are other people out there that think the same things, other groups out there that think the same things. But I think we're actively trying to be a bit more vocal about it, you know, and it's not like we're being vocal like the minority of young Earth creationists who are a minority, but they're very vocal and it's nonsense. You know, we're trying to, you know, take it from a rational point of view. That's important.
You're not taking your cue from them.
Yeah, not at all.
Good. Well, listen, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to bring up.
Apart from, you know, I'd like to say to the team that, you know, have got together and, you know, what stage we've got at, you know, I have a lot of respect for them, and I think they're doing really, really well. I think, you know, we've only sort of been around for about a year. We've only had a constitution in place for maybe about 6 months, and already we've got a decent enough following online. You know, the brunches are really well supported. You know, it's really good to see that support, and it's really good to see that the people who are on the sort of exec team are passionate about that. So, you know, hats off to them for making it really good for us.
Absolutely well done. When you told me that actually you were a year old, I actually had to stop and think, no, surely they've been around. I've seen them around for longer. But actually I think that's testament to certainly the present. So my interaction would have been through a social media channel. Yeah. So I think that's testament to your success there. Yeah. You've definitely captured certainly the attention of those who are looking at that. So
and that has the vast majority of that work has been put down to Colin Morrison, and so, you know, I mean, he has done an awful lot of work on that. And I have to hats off to him.
Brilliant.
You know, I've just sat in the back going, "Are you going to put more stuff online?" Right?
Well, you know, they're behind every great man. There's another great man with a whip. Or
there's a lazier man.
A lazier man. It's like, come on, do it. Excellent. Well, listen, thank you so much, Boyd, for coming in. Actually, one of the questions I want to ask: can I and other people in the Republic of Ireland officially join Atheist NI? Or
that's. Actually, I should probably do a bit of promotion for that.
Or can we help in any other way? How can we help?
So first off, we have just had the website built. It's atheistni.org.uk. You can go there and look at the blogs. There's a bit about who we are. The website actually only went live maybe a week and a half ago. But there's some blogs up on there. We will be looking at the options for membership at some point. So yes, we would love people to become members and do a bit of donating. And everybody's welcome to attend the Sunday brunches, and that be you atheist or not. You could be from any sort of denomination. Just come along, enjoy it, whatever you want there.
We'll have a nice
exactly. Just
talk.
Chat, chill. The food's great in the Mac. We have them in the Mac once a month. You can find them on our Facebook page, and they'll be on the website as well. With regards to things that we are sort of pushing with, that, you know, we're looking for help with, we are very open to ideas. And at the minute, as I say, we're getting the information together so that we can put some sort of plan of attack out. And when we put that out, we would welcome ideas and we would welcome help. Things like this is, you know, the radio show it is a help. You know, at the minute we're looking to do some video blogs. So if there's anybody from Northern Ireland listening that would like to do some video recording and editing, that would be amazing.
I know a couple of people out there, Phil,
there we go.
who may be able to help you out with that. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. And obviously we here at the Republic fully support it. I certainly hope I'm going to try and get up to one of those brunches. I'm sure some people in Atheist Ireland want me to maybe attend one of theirs first, so I must do that first. But then I will definitely come up, and I'd love to meet some of the other people there. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll make sure to put up all those links. And thank you for listening, and we'll have another episode in 1 month's time. Thank you very much.
What this looks like imprisonment. What's worse is that the prisoners don't know that they're prisoners. Even defend the tactics that are used to imprison them. A conquered mind, trying to conquer other minds, selling. Come out here, I'll show you what this looks like imprisonment. What's worse is that the prisoners don't know that they're prisoners. Even defend the tactics that are used to imprison them.